In today's episode, we ask what happens when discipline, not hustle, becomes the real growth strategy.
Being really good at doing the work becomes the thing that keeps you stuck. As an operator, you get rewarded for solving problems. You jump in, you fix things, you make it happen. That works early on, but if you keep doing that forever, you become the bottleneck.
For real estate entrepreneurs who are stretched thin, what would happen if you step back and really step into alignment? Could that create more momentum versus other options? Hey everyone, welcome back to the Freedom Blueprint. I'm Adrienne Green, and today we're here with Tim Kelly. Now, our listeners know we focus on how real estate entrepreneurs break free of the grind and create the freedom they really wanted at the start. And Tim is a perfect example of this. So I'm excited for you to be here and share your story with us, Tim.
Adrienne, thanks so much for having me. Been looking forward to our conversation. Yeah, it's an honor to be here.
Awesome. Well, to set the stage for our listeners, what does your real estate portfolio look like today?
So quick version, I started kind of like a lot of people, kind of thinking small, the residential, and then I got exposed to bigger rooms and, bigger conversations and bigger possibilities. Today, my background mostly is in commercial real estate. So multifamily apartment buildings, mobile home communities through partnerships, joint ventures. And then I really leaned into helping military families understand how to move from trading their time for money into building assets, because I started my journey when I was active duty. So it wasn't the biggest shift wasn't the portfolio from residential to commercial. It was truly first an identity shift, and commercial real estate kind of entered the picture for me when I was active duty. Around 10 years in, I got this bug. I had to free up my time, but I mostly focused on apartment buildings and mobile home communities.
Awesome. That gives us a good picture. And what I love that you're teasing there with the identity shift is the idea of be, do, have, right? In order to have, we first have to change who we are, that identity shift. And then that changes our actions. And then that changes our results. So we'll get into that. Let's ease our way in.
But yeah, it's so important. So important.
Let's start at the beginning. I know with your military background, we can see the sign for those who are watching on YouTube with the video, discipline equals freedom. You talk a lot about discipline as a tool, and it's not just a trait, right? It's something we're actively using. What does that look like in the day-to-day for you running your real estate business?
There's a reason why that sign's up there. Discipline is not just wake up early and grind. It's there's just a lot of misconceptions around a discipline. And that's how a lot of people, especially high performers, high achievers, burn themselves out. To me, discipline is the ability to keep promises to yourself when the emotion is ramped up, And so in business, that looks kind of boring. And it looks just making the calls when you don't feel like it and reviewing the numbers one level deeper when it could be easier just to avoid them and assume that, the rules of thumb apply, and having the hard conversations before resentment builds. That's such a big one, especially personal conversations. So many high performers could have those, bold, requiring a lot of bold and courageous, difficult conversations. But ultimately, discipline is following the system instead of chasing every, shiny object. And I think, again, people confuse discipline with intensity.
Right.
And that's easy for a few days, but it's consistency over a long kind of time horizon where the results will just show up when you don't even really expect them. And a lot of people like to correlate discipline is a restrictive thing, less freedom. But like it says, it's actually the complete opposite. It says discipline equals freedom. It's simply when you have actual discipline, Adrienne, it's simply the structure and system that you are able to put in place in your life to give you the life that you want,
Right.
Well, if you're listening, and you're engaged here, I ask you, what are you depending on motivation when you actually just need a system? And that's where discipline becomes that tool.
I think that it's so helpful. I know for myself, Tim, what really was transformational is when I started really doing time blocking on my calendar and committing to that time blocking. It is an important, and a meeting with someone important. And then, like you said, it gives you that freedom. So I know I time block my working hours. And then when they're done, it's easier to have the freedom to go do other fun things because I know I got my work done because I had those time blocks that got done.
Yeah. Time blocking has been a game changer for me as well.
And a great example of the discipline. So Along those lines of discipline, you do have this military background. I know that's probably been a really important factor in shaping the way you handle everything. And what I'd love to talk about, because I know it applies to a lot of investors, is decision making under pressure. How does your military experience inform how you do that?
Under pressure, like the military taught me a lot, but directly tied to this, it taught me that like the pressure itself doesn't create your character. It reveals your level of preparation. In the Navy, especially like leadership and operational environments that I held, like you learn quickly that waiting for that perfect information can cost you. You still need to be able to assess risk. You have to gather data, listen to your team of advisors, but you can't like hide behind analysis forever. Think about how easy that correlates to real estate investing, Adrienne. Like it translates directly to it. A lot of investors get stuck because they want certainty before action.
Right.
Analysis paralysis, like we've all heard, but like real estate does not give you certainty because and business does not give you that certainty. Life does not always give you that certainty. What
Mm-mm.
you get is information. You get your experience from taking action. You have to learn how to assess the risk, identify the downside, of course, but you make the best decision with the information available. And then you just pivot, right? Because of the decisions that I was faced with, I'm like, I need a framework for this. And I created a framework. And
Okay.
this is for you to use when you're faced with any kind of minor or major decision. If I take action in this way, I think if I use this, if I take action in this way, if I you're thinking about submitting the offer or calling the broker, or calling that high net worth individual that has expressed interest before, and they have 7 figures to invest, or even like signing the PSA or signing the loan documents. Those are big decisions, right? Whatever it is, the framework is this, and I want you to use this, right? Number one, you ask yourself, like, if I do this thing, what is the worst case scenario about it, right? And then you say, well, what is the best case scenario, right? And then
Hmm.
you think, what is the most likely case scenario? And that's going to give you like a realistic idea of probably what's going to happen. And then you just count to 3, 3, 2, 1, and you decide. Sometimes you need a little bit more depth, but like in a quick way, I've used this framework so many times where within less than a minute, I can make that decision. And what is the worst case scenario? What is the best case scenario? What is the most likely case scenario? And I'm like, wow, that gives me a lot of perspective. 3, 2, 1, and I decide and I move, right? But sometimes you
Right.
need to assess your resources. You have to assess 5 different things. Like, what is your timeline? And we know a lot of times in real estate, you're in a timeline. You're on a lender's timeline. You have 3 days to submit, EMD. You have usually 60 to maybe 45 to 60 days of due diligence, right? Usually, how much time do I have? How much capital do I have? What does your team look like? What is your level of energy? And then how much knowledge do you have in this? If you really want to take it
Right.
one level deeper, assess those 5 things, and you have to decide. The audience takeaway, if you're listening, is this, right? Confidence does not come from knowing everything will work.
Right.
Confidence comes from knowing that you can respond well when it doesn't. Remember, I love sharing this because my mentor told me this one time, and it's always resonated with me. You won't ever see the top of the stairs until you start taking the couple first steps. You'll
Hmm.
never see the top of that staircase until you start taking the first couple steps. And the cost of you sitting at the bottom of that staircase is so much more than the cost of you taking the first few steps and making some mistakes along the way. Those
Right.
mistakes are inevitable,
Right.
like simply just part of the process.
Right. Embracing imperfect action. That is okay, but we're going to learn more than not doing it at all.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, and I love what you start off with there about what's the worst case scenario, because I see all the time with all humanity, I would say not just real estate investors, that we have this fear of failure because we think that US American culture, really makes failure seem like you're the worst person in the world. And they think, oh my gosh, if I fail at this, I'm going to be homeless living under a bridge, right? And the truth is that often the real worst case scenario is not nearly that severe if we actually think about it logically instead of just having our
Sure.
emotions take over.
You've likely already put so much into it. You've likely already have the right team assembled. You've likely got the capital assembled. But look, just like you said, Adrian, our society programs us to be small, to be conservative. And that's why it's so important to be around people who think big, because if you isolate yourself, the part of your brain that wants you to stay small, not take risks, not think big is going to negotiate with you and win. Like it's going to
Right.
convince you not to take that step, not to take that risk, not to think big because of how our society is. We're programmed just to work for somebody, give somebody else the risk, just do what you're told, go to school, get a good job. Like it has programmed us since we are born into this world, right?
Right.
So if you isolate yourself, that part of your brain that's just inherent is going to win the negotiation with you.
Well, and that sets us up perfectly, Tim, to revisit that mindset shift that you experienced from when you started real estate investing and you were kind of thinking small. You were just an operator, maybe wanting a little bit of passive income. And you had that mindset shift that you spoke about in the introduction, where you really became a leader, you thought bigger. What did that look like for you? What wisdom would you give to listeners who are maybe still where you were when you started?
This is an easy trap for ambitious people to get into, man. Like the biggest shift for me was realizing that like being really good at like doing the work becomes the thing that keeps you stuck.
Hmm.
As an operator, you get rewarded for solving problems. You jump in, you fix things, like you make it happen, right? That works early on, but if you keep doing that forever, you become the bottleneck.
Right.
Leadership requires like a different question. Instead of asking, how do I solve this? You have to ask, who should own this and what system would prevent this from like depending on me next time? That was a hard
Right.
shift because doing the work feels productive.
Right.
Leadership is not about being the hero, Adrian. It's about building people, building systems, and offering that clarity so the mission can move without everything running like through you, getting your approval. For the ones listening, I'd say this: if your business needs your constant heroics, like to function every day, you don't have a business that you have a demanding job with your name on it. Right.
Right.
And I
Right.
always appreciate a good book recommendation. And so here's one for this exact topic. Maybe you've read it, Adrian's Who Not How.
Right.
Not how do you make this happen, is who can help me make this happen, or who can I get to own this, as long as they have a clear vision. It's not easy to let go of the vine. What some of us call, when you scale, you're like, you have to let go of the vine because you built this. Like, just allow other people to care for, nurture, and scale like what you put so much into this. It's not easy, but that's next level leadership.
Mhm.
The key
Right.
with this though is to be able to like articulate that mission and vision so clearly that you're going to inspire others to join you. And that's not leadership, that's real influence.
I love it. And obviously, I'm on board for this. I mean, I have a virtual assistant business, and I think that, so many people, they do need to get out of the doing. And what's cool is, with like virtual executive assistants that we focus on, I've seen, Tim, when people do exactly what you're saying and when they're successful. And the cool thing is, a lot of our like virtual EAs, they haven't had exposure. They're not in a world where real estate investing has been presented as an option, right? A lot like with Americans as well. And so it's cool when you see that these virtual executive assistants kind of catch the dream and the entrepreneurialism from their clients. I know, like for me, my executive assistant in the Philippines, he bought a business, like a corner shop that sells like rice and other basic goods like that. And he then gave it to his parents to run. So they get income, they're able to take care of themselves. And I mean, it's relatively rare in the Philippines. And it was cool to see that you can cast that vision, that you can tell people and share this idea of entrepreneurial and see it take root.
Dude, that's such a great example. And that's really like you can't be the bottleneck. Eventually you have to step away. But it's not easy to do, man. It's not really easy to think through that type of decision.
So, when you started scaling your portfolio, when you started to realize that you didn't want to be like the doer for everything, what were some of the first tasks you identified to hand off? And how did you know when it was time to hand those off and level up?
So I think that's what really attracted me to multifamily, like large commercial multifamily. Because like before I even got involved in real estate investing, I knew I didn't want to manage properties, manage people, manage tenants. But the first apartment building that I had partnered on, it was a 42 unit apartment building. And before that, it was a fourplex. It was like, I had a fourplex. I self managed just to figure out the systems. And I quickly knew I'm hiring a property manager for that fourplex. And I'm like, I'm never managing it again. But then I got in the 42 unit. I'm like, oh, we're good. We're going to hire a property manager. Everything's going to be great. It's going to be real passive income. What we didn't realize was 42 units was not big enough to pay a full-time property manager. And the numbers didn't make sense yet. And so we were only able to afford a part-time property manager at the time. And so, first of all, we hired the wrong property manager. Huge mistake, and they convinced us that they were the right fit. That was one of the biggest mistakes. And then we ended up realizing that we needed to find someone who could actually only be paid part-time, but it's like serve the community well enough to where it could still be profitable. And that's not easy. And so we had to get real creative with it. It ended up being a home run because she was just a rock star. The person that we hired on as a part-time manager, she made it happen. But huge lesson learned was never, ever again joined a team or bought a deal that was too small where we were not able to afford a full-time property management team. And in most markets, 80 to 100 units, you probably have enough revenue to pay a full-time property management team. And so that was the first thing. And like learning from that, the bigger you go, the easier they are to manage because you could hire a full-time manager, and the easier they are to finance because you can get non-recourse debt. I knew I didn't want to do operations. I knew, management was the first piece, but once we kind of got to that point, it was the bookkeeping. I'm not left brain analytical, data driven. I'm never the underwriter. I'm more of connecting with the brokers to find the right deals, sharing the deal criteria, and then connecting with investors, getting to know what their goals are and helping the team raise capital. And so bookkeeping was the first thing that I ended up delegating because I really didn't want to do that. And nowadays you can have Claude Cowork bookkeep for you. Like you don't even need to hire a bookkeeper anymore. You just got to talk to your tax advisor to know exactly how they like to see all of their data and all the financials so they could do your taxes for you. And then you just tell Claude Cowork to run it. And that's kind of been my solution. I actually let go of my bookkeeper about a year and a half ago because it's now AI.
If you're a real estate entrepreneur trying to scale while doing everything yourself, there's a better way. The Time and Freedom Starter Pack gives you the exact first steps to reclaim hours each week with real support, including what to hand off, where to start, and simple tools you can put into place right away. Download it for free at adriennegreen.com/starter pack. Now let's get back to the episode. Right. And I think that's, part of that delegation and getting out of like being that operator is like, I always view it as like the systems, the tech, and then the team, right? And so you mentioned before, like the systems part of your discipline, right? The system that you run again and again, the tech, like Claude, AI, all of those options. And then you got your team for those things that the systems and the tech are not solving, like your property manager, your boots on the ground there. Love it. Now, what does a well-built system look like to you? And how do you know when a process or something is ready to delegate to someone else?
For me, for my brain, I have to use like a framework. I guess you can call it a framework, but it's more like my filter. First, like mission. Second is money. Third is energy. And fourth is like the unique ability. And so first, like, is this thing that I'm spending time on or that I'm about to spend my time on connected to the mission? If not, like, why am I doing it anyway? Right. So that's the first
Right.
filter. The second thing is, does this directly drive revenue, the money, right? Does it drive revenue, relationships, or does it reduce risk? It's all kind of tied to the capital. If not, it might not belong on my plate. Third is energy. Some tasks look small, but they like drain the life out of you. Like for me, like running numbers, data analysis, all that stuff. It might not take that actually does those types of things do take time, but they suck the life out of me, right? Other tasks create energy because they align with your strengths. They give you life, they give you joy, they give you fulfillment. You got to focus on those things that actually give you energy. And then fourth is like unique ability. Am I doing this because I haven't like slowed down long enough to like train someone else? I'm actually really good at this? So like a lot of high performers and people who achieve are addicted to being needed, unfortunately. And so
Right.
they keep things on their plate, not because they should, but because it kind of sometimes just makes them feel important, you know?
Right. The ego.
Man, and that's dangerous. Like the goal is not to be needed everywhere. The goal is to be like the most useful where you are most gifted. So this is like the first time you're kind of hearing this, the concept, keep it simple. Look at like what you have done over the last 7 to 14 days and say like, you just categorize into two different categories. Are these transactional tasks or are these transformational tasks? And like moving forward over the next week or two, track what you're doing and what your tasks are, and just really make a list, 2 columns. Like, is this a transactional task that I could delegate to somebody because they're better than it? Or I could hire, like you said, a VA for $10 an hour or less. Those tasks that are transactional are the ones you delegate first, especially if they're sucking the life out of you, if they're not something you're good at, if that doesn't bring you joy. Those are absolutely the first that you need to delegate. For me is, bookkeeping and admin stuff.
Mhm. Right. I love how you've identified your areas of giftedness, your unique ability and interest, and you really lean into that and eliminate as much of the other things off of your plate as you can. Now, what I would love, Tim, I know that you coach high performers, and I'm curious if you've learned something from anybody you've coached that you've brought into your own business, right? Has anything from coaching changed the way you lead or do things within your own business and team?
I think it's just the patterns that I picked up on that I see in so many ambitious people. They know how to win. They
Mhm.
know how to execute. They know how to provide, make money. They know how to achieve and they know how to carry pressure. They know how to be bold and courageous. But a lot of times, asking just a couple very simple but powerful questions that helps reveal, like, on the inside, they're fragmented. Like,
Mhm.
their level of faith, the most important relationships, their health, their emotions, they're not fully aligned. So they're successful from the outside, but there's a gap between who people think they are and who they think they are because they know they are not clear. They're not as energized as they like to be, and they're just not aligned as they'd like to be. And so
Mhm.
helping people get crystal clear on like what they're putting their energy into, what they bring to the table, like what value do they bring to the table and why that's important to them, cracks
Right.
open so many different issues. I'm talking about some of the most ambitious people. 8-figure entrepreneurs are not crystal clear. And what's dangerous about that is that they've like climbed these mountains and they're summited and they stand on top of this mountain and they look around and they realize they're on top of the wrong mountain because they pursued something because they think or they thought they were going up that right mountain. They like somebody else convinced them that that's what they needed to do. They never
Mhm.
took the time to
Right.
really think through, am I clear on where I'm headed and why that's important to me? Not important to society, not important to what other people told me they thought I should do, but it's important. And you could easily do this going 7 layers deep. And I love doing this with people. I'm sure you've heard about this. It's something that reveals a lot. And you pursue something, you have to ask yourself, why am I doing this in the first place? And then you answer typically, oh, because I want freedom or I want options. Well, why is that important to you? And then they say, well, my parents, they provided for me and I didn't really experience a lot of options of freedom growing up. That's why it's important. Well, why is that important to you? And you go 7 layers deep, right? And it becomes very emotional, really give you that like heaviness, then it's probably not your real why. You're probably not your real mission or purpose. Like why God put you on this earth?
Mhm.
So that level of clarity is always the first thing I talk to people about when they come to me and they feel unaligned and they know that they're capable of more. It always starts with clarity.
And I understand you have this phrase of scaling with intention, which I think is kind of like the contrast to the what you just told us about, right? Like working your booty off and being at the top of the wrong mountain. So, what does scaling with intention mean to you? Especially if you figure like a listener is some real estate entrepreneur who's already busy and stretched thin. How does this not make them put more on their plate, you know?
I love this question. The first step is always the clarity, but like once you have that level of clarity, that well built system is going to allow you to maintain that level of clarity without like constant explanation. And so to me, like a process is like ready to kind of delegate when 4 things are clear. You have a desired outcome, you have the clear steps, you have the standard, and then you have the feedback loop, right? So a lot of people will delegate tasks, but tasks can't be delegated because it's not sustainable. But leaders, the right leaders, delegate the outcomes. Like if I say,
Mhm.
hey, go handle this, but I have not defined what success looks like or what decisions they can make or like when to escalate, the issues or how we'll measure progress. And I didn't actually delegate. I kind of just dumped it on, on
Right.
that person, right? That's where leaders create confusion. And then they kind of just like blame that person because they didn't think they did it right. And
Right.
so it's not really like a lot of the delegation failure is actually leadership failure. The test is, can someone reasonably and with competence follow the process, produce the expected result, and know what to do when something is falling outside the norm? If yes, then it's ready. Like if not, you don't have a system yet. You kind of just have trivial knowledge, I guess you could just call it. So delegation without clarity is not leadership. It's just dumping. And so scaling with intention, there's so much to put into that because like a lot of it is mindset and clarity and going in the right direction and being able to articulate that vision and mission so clearly that others just want to join you and want to help you in this mission, but then putting these processes in place and properly delegating. So when you can do those transformational tasks, you're not stuck doing the transactional tasks, you could delegate those transactional tasks well.
Right. It sounds like, transformation always is work. If people this is different than how people are doing it, it's going to be some work. There's going to be that messy middle as they get these things figured out. And yet it sounds like on the other side of it, they're able to have a more aligned life.
Trust me, I made a lot of mistakes in this arena.
Yes, that's what I love about podcasting is, we can come on and share stories like yours, Tim, and help other people get further faster, right? It's like avoid all the mistakes I made and just get to the finish line faster, right?
Yeah, exactly. I've never made any mistakes. Oh my God. I would love to share some mistakes. And you learn, I think the human brain learns more from like the really, really hard mistakes than anything else. And, if you're not willing to learn the hard way and embrace challenge and know that failure is part of the progress, I don't know if this is for you. I don't know if this failure and lessons are sort of inevitable, right? And it's how you frame it, is how you perceive it. And so
Mhm.
like if you're making mistakes or you tried once and you failed and you think, oh, I guess it's just not for me. That's why business isn't for everybody. And people cannot really continue to endure because those who just continue moving forward and understand that those failures are just part of the process, they're the ones who will see the fruits of their labor and the freedom.
Awesome. Well, Tim, I think you shared a lot of words of wisdom with us here on today's episode. If people would like to connect with you or discuss this further, what's the best way for them to reach out?
Yeah, Adrian, thanks. I'm all over social media. I love LinkedIn. The best way, my website is thetimothykelly.com. And that's also my handle on LinkedIn, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook is at the Timothy Kelly. If this conversation resonated with you and you know you're capable of more and you think that there might be a gap in your clarity or your level of energy or that you might be misaligned, my website actually has this really fun, free, interactive clarity assessment that you could take, right? It kind of walks you through, asks you some very simple but very powerful questions on to help you figure out where are the gaps in your clarity, in your energy, in your level of alignment and your purpose. And then it'll kind of just give you some answers. And then I'll send you this really cool gap guide. It's like a PDF that kind of walks you through what are the things that you could actually do about it now, because information is all out there. You can get a ton of a ton of information right now with AI and Google, but without implementation, that information is useless. So you got to do something about it. You have to know what you need to do. You have to learn and assess yourself, increase your level of self-awareness, and then start doing something about it and take action. That's kind of that clarity assessment will allow you to have that awareness. And then the gap guide that will be sent to you via PDF, it'll kind of walk you through the next steps. And then it'll offer you an opportunity to book a call with me if you want to like review your results, and I could share and serve you in any way I can.
I love it. Well, thank you so much, Tim Kelly, for joining us. And for our listeners, that is a wrap on today's episode of The Freedom Blueprint. If you need help with a virtual executive assistant to scale your team, of course, reach out. I'm happy to help and get you connected with our team over at Workergenics. Or if you want to do that clarity assessment, go check out Tim's website. I think that sounds really fun and exciting. So thank you guys, and join me again next week for another episode of The Freedom Blueprint.